architecture and other arts, they all flourished. But you know, of course, as Lucknowites are aware, like there are a lot of misconceptions of regarding Lucknow architecture, and some people call it hybrid, and there are various names. Like Percy Brown has called it by various names, and the mixed architecture and khichdi architecture, lot of names. So why it happened like that? Actually, if you compare the Lucknow skyline with the Persian poetry, the case is similar. You know, the Persian poets, they used to take a very mundane and common topics, and but they used to interpret, they used to express in such a novel manner that they would urge the audience to rethink on these topics, on these themes. So that's the beauty of Lucknow architecture. Like, in spite of these diverse influences, they could maintain the balance and harmony of its aesthetics, and that showed their evolved sense of aesthetics. It was not an easy job. Like the Hindu architecture, the Islamic architecture, then of course European at a later stage. But they could amalgamate and present it beautifully to the world. So it is in itself a commendable thing, and we as Lucknowites are proud of it. So now the title of our webinar is Claude Martin and his buildings. Now, who was Claude Martin? I'll give a very short brief. In fact, Ms. Amita Sinha would detail it out. Of course, he was an adventurer, and he was not an architect, not at all an architect. Basically, he was a surveyor, and he was sort of introduced to the court of Shujauddaulah at Faizabad by Antoine Paulier, a French architect, as a friend of his. Now, this gentleman, Claude Martin, he sort of expressed the countries of Europe, its gems, its treasures, its buildings, so creatively in front of the Nawab. The Nawab got impressed, and he employed him as the supervisor of his new construction, new buildings to be made. But now rest is history. The Nawab died. The capital was shifted to Lucknow by Asaf-ud-Daula, and with Asaf-ud-Daula, Claude Martin also came into Lucknow. And from here, his journey started, and he made some marvelous structures. And then, in fact, the influence of his on Lucknow architecture, the European architecture, in fact, Lucknow architecture, the European architecture, that pehchan kind of thing got transferred to Lucknow. So it's basically the impact of Claude Martin buildings, a lot of impact on Lucknow architecture at the time of Nawab's period, which we can see it's manifested. So if we talk of Lucknow architecture, it's actually the Nawabi period. It can be divided into two parts. From 1775 to 1800, this is a traditional phase, which actually saw a lot of post-Mughal architecture by the Nawabs and other royalties, and parallelly there was these East India engineers and people with Claude Martin who were making structures which were influenced by European architecture. So it was from 1775 to 1800, when at the time of Asaf-ud-Daula and Saadat Ali Khan. But after 1800 and before the annexation of Awadh by the Britishers, that means till 1856, we see an architecture which is in hybrid style, a hybrid style which has a lot of elements of Hindu architecture, that Rajputana style, then Islamic style, and of course the European influence, a lot of European influence. So it's basically a medley of Eastern and Western architecture with a lot of fluted domes, ogee arches, and arabesque foliations. So this is the period which we are going to talk more today. And if we talk of influence of European architecture on Lucknow buildings, it's very easy to see that the impact is more on the palace architecture, not on religious architecture. The religious architecture, they were very loyal to the Islamic the elements, and they stuck to it. We see all the Imam Baras till the later stages, very less of European influence. But the palace architecture, the residential courties and other things which got constructed during this period, they had that influence. We can see the Palladian columns, the triangular pediments, and the sort of Adam style fan lights. Those kind of things are very much evident at the palaces, whether you see Chhatar Manzil, whether you see Kesar Bagh, if you talk of Kesar Bagh Palace, and other buildings like we are going to see just now, Musa Bagh and Farad Bakhsh, and lot many buildings. In fact, Khurshid Manzil, so many examples are there. But even to the extent, even the Zenanas, you can see that they were so aware of European influence, aware of European architecture, that Zenana never used to have windows which were seen sort of, which overlooked the roadside. But here, what these architects or the constructor, the people who made it did, they made false tall windows, and in sort of niches, they created niches, and in the niches they used to put the statues of a male person or painted somehow in a very creative manner, so that it gives a look of a presence of a tall window, but it's a false window. In fact, we can see the Roman blinds have been replicated falsely with the help of stucco work. And but from the planning wise, they were indigenously Indian. It was a courtyard style. It used to open out inwards, and the planning was totally climatically responsive and as per the weather conditions of this place. So that's the very broad outline of the impact which happened. And but you know, the successively, when each Nawab came, they wanted to make a grander than the previous Nawab. So there was a lot of show of power, and it was a power play, in fact. And they used to construct, but they used to construct near the river or sort of a little far off. But the maximum buildings are close by the riverfront, by the river Gomti. They could assess the advantages, the cool breeze, the openness, basically the boat rides in the river, and of course the healthy environs, and lot of water for their gardens. That's the best part of it. That's the best part. In fact, it's a fact. And if you were making something along the river banks, there's no dearth of water. They couldn't understand, and they were great lovers of baths, as we all know. The Lucknow is also known as city of baths. So even in fact, many buildings had arched openings towards the river, and from where the water used to come in. Like we can see in Farad Baksh, we could see in Chadar Manzil, and not many places. And the water was allowed inside. And as the river ascended, the habitat also ascended on the upper floors. And as the river receded, that means the summers, the habitat was in the lowermost subterranean level. So it was very cool in the summers. So they could think of that microclimate. They could think of that, that the advantages, the merits of the riverbank, which after a certain time, the Lucknowites forgot. So there were walled gardens where along the river where the fights of the animals were staged. In fact, the hunting of birds like quails and partridges also used to happen. They were all staged, and a lot of visitors were invited, Europeans, most of the times. So they had many and in fact, it was a retreat. It was a retreat, a summer retreat for the Nawabs and their families. So, so many advantages were there. So, Claude Martin, his buildings along the riverfront. We can just imagine what it would be if that Musa Bagh restored park is there in the outskirts of Lucknow, and we all have a chance to view and in fact see these ruins in a better shape. At present, I'll let you know that it's in a worse condition. It's too bad a condition. And in fact, yesterday only somebody had posted, a friend of mine has posted a picture of Musa Bagh, in fact, and they were trying, they're rather planning to shoot a picture short film on those grounds. But it is totally littered with garbage and very bad condition. So let's hope for the best. And as Amita ji has said, that in fact, I've got a question also, a request also over here. What is the impact of General Claude Martin's architecture on Lucknow architecture? So, in fact, this is a part of our total webinar, and it would be worthwhile if we see in totality what is Lucknow architecture, a little bit, try to understand, and where the impact fits in. Not all buildings, its influence is seen. As I have already said, that it's only on the palace architecture, not on religious architecture at all. So the architecture, the religious architecture is kept pure and sublime, and the Nawabs and the other royals, they did not let anything permeate the architecture of Imam Baras or the religious architecture in totality. So let me share you some slides regarding this topic. And you see, most of the slides are from my book, and also the pictures are from there only. So if we talk of Lucknow heritage, of course, if we start from prehistoric era, it's Lord Lakshmana who was supposed to lay the foundation of the city in Treta Yuga. And in fact, not many things happened after that. In fact, we are planning to host another webinar next to it, the prehistoric Lucknow before the Nawabs. So we will be dealing in that in detail. That is a very interesting story, in fact, which nobody has delved into as yet. So, but here now we are talking of Nawabi Lucknow. So, if we start the Nawabi period, of course, Asaf-ud-Daula, he in fact was responsible when Lucknow was called the Golden City of the East. It was his efforts and patronage that made this city a Golden City of the East. Now, this is a beautiful architecture. It's mostly religious architecture, except the Rumi Darwaza, of course. Uh, if we see in totality, the skyline, the main signature element of Lucknow architecture, it's basically the continuous parapet with multiple arches, multiple domes, and the corners, the edges accentuated by chhatris or canopies. That's the signature skyline which we all love, and Lucknow is famous for the skyline, the salute of the architecture all over the world. So it is the parapet which steals the show, and it was rather developed by the Nawabi architecture over the period of time. So, and otherwise, we'll come to other features. Now, we were talking of riverfronts and like Gomti riverfront. If we don't talk of Charbagh, it would be incomplete, as Amita ji has also talked about in the restoration plan. Now, there's a difference between the initial Nawabi gardens. They were basically Islamic Charbaghs, the 4 square gardens, which had a local variation of certain places. And in fact, it's a garden of paradise. It's derived from Pere and Dias. So it's a walled garden, and it's something very unique and very exclusive of Persian gardens, which came to India with Babur. And he brought in this Charbagh style of landscaping to Lucknow, to India, and the Nawabs, they had their all gardens with little bit variations, very similar to Charbagh style of gardens. In contrary, the colonial parks, which were brought in after the annexation of Awadh and the urban surgery of Awadh after the 1857, they were the English landscape parks, very informal styled, manicured lawns, and they were like a foreground to their signature building. And they were treated as a foreground. That's all. That which tree would look good in front of that building, what color combinations, and that was a totally that romantic view of a garden, you would say rather, which is practiced in England with the broad expanse of meadows and trees here and there. So we have both types in the post this thing period. We have more the contemporary also. We are following the English garden pattern till now. Now, Awadh was known as Amita ji was saying. It's like they had a river as a very important thing in the palace architecture, and as Rosie Llewellyn-Jones says, that river was a place of celebration and partying for them, and we had beautiful shapes of boats, a peacock shape or swan shape, or say barges of various hues and colors, where Diwali was celebrated and Holi was celebrated. We have a beautiful picture of Wajid Ali Shah playing in fact, having a Vasant Utsav on the large peacock shaped boat that is there in the miniatures of Awadh. So it had a very important place. In fact, the one at the time of Nasiruddin Haider, a boat was brought in from Calcutta, and it was named as Sultan of Awadh with the latest technology of that time, and it was a special boat from Calcutta. So the river played such an important part during the Nawabi period. Now, coming to our topic, Claude Martin and his buildings, as she's already described in detail, La Martiniere is one of her signature building, and it's a crowning glory of Awadh architecture. And now, if you start seeing the features, so that we may recall in the architecture afterwards, you can see that the octagonal towers at the ends are there, the turrets are there, and at the top of the central tower, the intersecting cast arches. This is a signature style of Claude Martin, which was repeated in not many buildings, say Kesar Bagh afterwards. And see the corners of the building, they have been accentuated by Hindu style canopies, which afterwards became chhatris of our very own Lucknow style. So that's how the journey began with with La Martiniere to the architecture afterwards. So I will not go again into the details. Of course, it was also beside the river, and it had axial symmetry. One side there were it was a woodland, and another side of the river. And the painting of Sitaram down below, which shows that the river had a very close connection with the building. And in fact, I suppose Amita ji must have, she in fact mentioned that the passive way of cooling were there in the Claude Martin's buildings. Out of many circular towers you see in the building, the central towers, four circular towers, they were only used for foundation. The other towers, they were all ventilation shafts, which brought cool breeze from the river, and it was circulated throughout the building, which in fact resulted in the very cool and airy kind of palace or tomb, whatever you say. So that's it. There are some views. Now, if we talk, already it has been explained, the Farhad Baksh, the building adjacent to Chhatar Manzil. Many new members might not be knowing. In fact, I make it a point to point out that this Farhad Baksh is a building next to Chhatar Manzil, which is still there and is being renovated. Nowadays, it is coming a lot of coverage in the newspaper, and Farhad Baksh has been discussed again and again. But not many people still, they are not aware what is Farhad Baksh. It's a koti next to the signature Chhatar Manzil, which is a beautiful prototype of a European architecture influence of French, say Gothic specifically in plan architecture. And what we have a picture here is the backside of the building. The building they all had access from the riverside. After the war of 1857, all these buildings were opened from the backside as the roads were cut throughout the city as a part of redevelopment, as a sort of better patrolled, better controlled city as per Britishers. They wanted well controlled, secured, so that they may control what's happening each building. And these buildings, they sort of opened out to the city gazers. It was a very bad sort of thing which happened after that surgery which happened. Robert Napier, who did, the military engineer, he had cut thoroughfares in the center of the city, like the Kesar Bagh. Of course, it was demolished, and this was also part of his plan, that the Chhatar Manzil, slowly all these buildings, they sort of fell down, and only at the moment in this particular complex, Farad Bakhsh and Badi Chhatar Manzil is there. Choti Chhatar Manzil and Darshan Vilas is being restored, of course, and Gulista-e-Ilm, of course, is no more. So this is the back side, and here also you can see this is the original Martin building, where we see the columns, the Tuscan order columns, the pediments, and these arched, multifoliated arches. They were, since they were at an earlier stage, still multifoliated arches were there. So it is a best example of Claude Martin's palace architecture. Now these are some of the pictures. As we can see, the river water flowed inside the palace, the building inside on the ground floor, and as discussed, it cooled the total building. The total building was airy and full of breeze. And in fact, it said that Saadat Ali Khan purchased it afterwards, and he bid it. So it was very difficult. Somebody else, Kuros, bought it, and he had to pay him double to get it for himself. Since he was not well, he because of it was his ill health, and he wanted to recuperate. He bought this palace and he made some changes afterwards. This is the restored part of the Farad Bakhsh. We can see it has been restored beautifully. Of course, slowly but steadily, things are coming in shape. Now, Musa Bagh has been already discussed, but kindly notice the fan lights, the Corinthian columns, the capitals, beautiful pillars, and the central Baradari. And of course, even these, this building had these octagonal towers at the back. So it had, again, the accentuated railings, and it was also, again, on a very high piece of land where the river was flowing one side, and from the other side you could view the whole Lucknow, the old Husainabad, the Asfi Masjid, the Tile Wali Masjid, the Rumi Darwaza, and all other major buildings from the altitude at which the building was set on. The Dilkusha, of course, again, it is a copy of Satan Delaval, and it was made by Major Gausley at the time of Saadat Ali Khan, and it was a beautiful structure. Now, of course, it is being kept as a picnic spot by ASI. That's but the conservation is not much as required at the moment. And in fact, at the time of the War of 1857, it changed hands thrice. It came into the control of, it was in the control of Britishers at the time of the war, but the sepoys, the revolutionaries, they got the control in the month of say June. Then again it was brought back by Colin Campbell in the month of November. So it changed hand very fast during that period. Of course, we have discussed now the Bibiapur Koti is another building which is said that is designed by Claude Martin, and it was a beautiful, again, a building which had the river view, And as you can see on the first floor, it had the covered veranda kind of thing with double columns, Tuscan order columns, and tall arched openings on the ground floor. And you can see the the false stonework which is being shown in the plaster, the copy of English or European style of buildings. And there was no stone in Lucknow, but they tried to copy the key breaks and keystones, and it looked like a stonework on the ground floor. You can see that. So basically it was built in the time of Saadat Ali Khan, when Claude Martin was very much in the picture. Now, if we talk of the religious buildings of Lucknow, Husainabad, Imambara, we can discuss that. And you will see this is the religious building of that era. And there's no, in fact, it is, it's of the period quite late, during the time of Muhammad Ali Shah. So there was no Claude Martin, and Europeans had quite a good hold on Lucknow, but still the religious building did not have any influence of European architecture. We see beautiful calligraphy, the famous stucco work, and of course the parapet with turrets, and the gilded dome, which was clad in copper or gold or whatever. So that's a signature style. In fact, if you see the layout, it was the Imambara was centrally placed, and the mosque at one side was at the Qibla axis, and there was a hammam on the opposite side, the Sawal Jawab concept. And then there was quite a lot of quarters all around the complex. So this is one example of with no influence of European architecture. Now, if we talk of, if we try to understand what were Imambaras, actually, of course, there are houses of mourning, as in Lucknow we all are aware, and it basically has three bays: the entrances, then Majlis, and the Shaishin. Now, they are inspired from the Rosas of Persia, which had a square base, and they were divided into 9 squares again, and the central square was used for the grave, with the sunlight pouring in from above, and the peripheral squares were used for circumambulation. So they are the structures which are inspired from the Rosas of Persia. Now, talking of the structure, of course, we have already discussed that signatures, parapet, the domes and minars of various shapes and sizes were there, but they never made any impact. It was the chhatris in combination with the parapet which left a permanent mark on Lucknow, and with the stucco work. It is the main feature of Lucknow style, and in fact, it is a renaissance of 17th century Deccani architecture, which had a lot of colorful decorations, the relief work, a floral pattern, the calligraphy. They were typical features of Deccan architecture, which was brought in by the Nawabs of that time. So, and the arches were of different sizes, and the gap which were created, it gave the mihrab effect, and that was decorated with stucco work, with a lot of floral designs or geometric designs, and that was the beauty of Lucknow architecture. And of course, you all must have heard that it was made from the mixture of mother of pearl and the seashells crushed, and it gave such beautiful shine that it shone better than the marble, and it was so strong that even the heavy shelling couldn't break it. So that was the beauty of that period architecture. Now, coming to the residency, of course, it was that piece of land which was given by Saadat Ali Khan to the resident, which expanded and became a big complex of European style villas, and all the Britishers were staying there. It was typical European villas, which a central hall and surrounding rooms with a big portico with the called circular pillars. And here also you can see the double height openings and the multifoliated arches beautifully decorated with floral design. And one particular very important aspect, the Avdi Guldasta, was at the top of the arch, which you can see in the left side building at the top of the multifoliated arch. It is part of the Begum Wali Koti. Now it doesn't look so beautiful. It's an old picture, but still we have little parts in the ruins still. And of course, it had that informal English gardens all around, and that typical Irish work of Avdi style has been used. And they were, they had that, look at the artificial fan light in the residency, in one of the doors. The doorway has an artificial fan light above. That was an effect of, in fact, impact or the influence of European architecture in Lucknow. Even the residency had it. They didn't have the real fan light. They made it in plaster, but they want to have that feel of Europe staying in Lucknow. Now, these are the great samples, and in fact, the most beautiful structures of Lucknow. In fact, after Bada Imambara, if anybody asks which monument should they see, in fact, these are the two tombs which has that beauty of proportions, that Mughal architectural that prototype has been used. And here also, in fact, it was made by Ghazi-ud-Din Haidar for Saadat Ali Khan. But look at the parapet again, the accentuated chhatris and the fluted domes. Beautiful proportion it has. And now we can see the influence of Martin. Now, on the right-hand side is the Gori Bibi Ka Maqbara, a structure which is there at the Lamartine grounds. And here are the two tombs of Kesar Bagh, the Saadat Ali Khan tomb and the Khurshid-Zadi tomb. Look at the proportions of the dome and the parapet around, almost similar. It's just that the tombs are grander in proportion, but they are very much similar. So that's from the Lamartine complex to the period, a very later period. But the continuation of same style, same embellishments, and same proportions that we can see. Now, coming to the later period, we are gradually coming to later period. This is the Chhatar Manzil and Lal Baradari. Of course, it is in the Farad Baksh and the Chhatar Manzil in the same complex. Lal Baradari used to be in the one big complex at the time of Ghazi-ud-Din Haidar and Nasir-ud-Din Haidar time. But now they seem to be isolated because of the road network which was brought in by the Britishers after 1857. Now, look, again we can see the buildings of the complex of that time and see the European influence, the influence of Claude Martin. We see the semicircular arches which were not there in Lucknow architecture, which were brought in at a later stage, the semicircular arches. Then, in fact, the false arches rather. We can have a look at the false arches as well. At the right-hand side, the corner part, and the pillars, the double pillars which have been used, totally European style. And of course, the top of the octagonal towers, it's giving a feel, a very Gothic kind of a castle of Europe. and which has been replicated a lot of times in Lucknow architecture. It was repeated in Kesarbagh Palace also. And it had a signature chatar, which said that it was, in fact, the complex was named after the mother of Saadat Ali Khan Chhatarpur, who was a Hindu queen of this Asafuddaula. And in fact, this Saadat Ali Khan was the half brother of Asafuddaula, but he was brought in by British after Asafuddaula died. And when he came into power, he had started this complex. It was completed by Ghaziuddin Haidar. This chatar was intentionally put, rather conceived by him to remember his mother. So a lot of European influence we can see here. And this is another view of Chatar Manzil. Here the pediments, it's a roadside view, a riverside view. And we can see the pediments, the arches, the pillars, totally European style. And whether you call it Claude Martin's impact or European, it's come to the same thing. And equal, in fact, it has half pillars. If you, in fact, it has the drawings in my book. Half pillars have been used on the wall itself. They are not full pillars, but they had to give that feel of pillars at the facade. Now, this again is a Darshan Vilas, which is being restored. You can see the picture of restored. We should feel happy that good restoration work has happened. Amita ji, you should be very happy also that Darshan Vilas has come to this picture now. It was in ruins. It was in very bad shape, but somehow the restoration work has happened quite good over here. And again, we can see the double height, triple height pillars, the top of the octagonal towers. In fact, these octagonal towers sometimes used to have the staircases also. And in Claude Martin buildings, they were used as the air ducts, which used to get the cool air from the river, and that air was circulated throughout the building. Again, the Lal Baradari is a later stage. You can see the actual windows and the false windows are very tall windows, giving a feel of French European windows. Still, of course, they are foliated to give that Avdi feeling. And still the parapet proportions have differed now, are different. The chhatri is bigger in proportion, but continuous parapet, the brackets, they are being continued. Now, this is, if we talk of the rivers and the Gomti. So this is one of the picture taken, in fact, it's a scroll painting of 1826. And it is still there at the Yale Center for British Art. And it shows a palace complex which was built by Nasiruddin Haidar, a very Georgian, a very false kind of structure on the riverside for his Vilayati Begum. So Vilayat is being sort of reproduced in this palace kind of a building with pediments and long windows and sort of Georgian style of structure. Now, this is again that scroll. It is the full scroll which is there at in the collection, and it said that the Nawab had Vitruvius Britannica, and he used to copy a lot of buildings from there. And look at the boats, beautiful boats, and we can see the Shanajaf Imambara and Kadam Rasool in one of the pictures. And it said that, in fact, the Vilayati Bagh is also seen in the second picture at a distance. So this was at the time of Nasiruddin Haidar. At that time, till that time, the river was very active. In fact, and In fact, after that, even Muhammad Ali Shah, Amjad Ali Shah, and then Wajid Ali Shah, they also did not turn their back to the river. It was very much part of Nawabi architecture. Now coming to Kesar Bagh, the glorious Kesar Bagh, of course, there nothing is there now apart from the Lucky Gates, and of course the Mermaid Gate is of no point to mention. But the Avdi Guldasta and the Mahi Maheta, that signature style of Avdi buildings, the pair of fishes is of course typically Avdi. But if you can see the Lucky Gate, the cast arches at the top, they may make us recall La Martiniere Central Tower. So again, till from the times of La Martiniere till the time of Wajid Ali Shah, say from 1800s to 1856, this feature kept on repeating itself in various forms. So this is the part of that gate. And now if you see the Kesar Pasand of the Kesar Bagh Palace, again, look at the pediments, lot many pediments, and it's said that Kesar Bagh had European statues and Arabic decorations and Charbagh style of gardens and Moorish turrets, lanterns. It was supposed to be the eighth wonder of the world, which Wajid Ali Shah wanted. So there's a central courtyard which had the Barabari in the center, and of course the Lanka, where the famous Raz were enacted, and Wajid Ali Shah used to play as Kanhaiya. So it has beautiful concussions of European architecture, but still the planning part, it was totally Indian. All the windows were opening inside the central courtyard. From the outside, there were only false windows. Again, sort of copying or say inspired architecture from Europe, but they were all inward looking. The whole Kesar Bagh Palace was inward looking. Now, no window was on the outer wall, the boundary wall, which were again the residential quarters. So now if you see the palace architecture, as we have already seen, the Adam style fan lights, the triangular pediments, and the pillars, they were part and parcel of Nawabi architecture. Again, the pictures you can see, another view, we can see the false arches and false decorations, which were not possible actually on the building, but done in the Kesar Bagh Palace. You can see the down right picture. The gateways are part and parcel, the east and the west gateways of Kesar Bagh Palace, the Lucky Gates, which are known as, and there's a third one, the Mermaid Gate, which opened out into the Chini Bagh, where Wajid Ali Shah used to sit under a large banyan tree as a jogi in the Jogiana fair. This has those kind of sort of stories, and in fact he has written in his book Bunny and mentioned about this particular gate. And on the left side gateway is the Sikandar Bagh Gate, part of the gateway which is in restored style at the main Ashok Marg. We can see a pair of fishes, again the pediments, and pediment style of crowning feature at the top of the arch. The chhatris are there. Look at the shape of the chhatris have been reinterpreted from the time of Claude Martin. Of course, they were a little different with the mandarins and mermaids or statues on top of them. But here, they are a little bit of Rajputana style with a chhajja all around it. So again, it has the same vocabulary, but reinterpreted. Now, Khurshid Manzil, the Girls La Martiniere College, gives a feel of an fortress, a mini fort, the octagonal towers, And look at the flight of steps, so European. It makes you sort of think of European chateau or villa, the curve of the pillars, and the Paladin style of entrance or porch have been covered afterwards. And they had that moat all around it as well as in La Martiniere. They had that. It was totally inspired from La Martiniere. It was made by Ghaziuddin Haider for his daughter Khushizadi. But all the basic elements were from La Martiniere, this particular building. These days it's a school, as we all know. And see the other palace, the Alambagh Palace, again the signature octagonal towers, and with the false windows all opening inside. It said the Alambagh Palace, the Khas Mahal, the queen of Wajid Ali Shah, she was a poetess and she used to write poetry, and it was totally a very depressed kind of building with no windows outside, all the windows opening inside. She had no interactive life in her lifetime. Of course, she was very loyal to Wajid Ali Shah, and she went with him to Metia Burj in Calcutta, but still. And you can see the Tarewali Koti, again, it looks like an entrance of a Parthenon, the Greek architecture, again. And the Begum Wali Koti, again, the false sort of panels which have been divided into, and fan lights, oval openings in the shape of fan lights, and the influence is clear. More palaces. This is that Darshan Vilas, the Corinthian columns, the beautiful columns, all European. And this, the Amiruddullah Library on the side, right side, it has more of Rajputana style of this Jharokas kind of thing, but basically more of European architecture. So now if we talk of coming to the gardens of Nawabs, Sophie Gordon had quoted Emily Eden, sister of Governor General of East India Company, such a place, the only residence I have coveted in India. Don't you remember reading in the Arabian Nights, Zubeda bets a garden of delight against the Caliph's palace of pictures? I'm sure this was the palace garden of delight. So these were the gardens which she was referring to. Now, which one we don't know. Most probably the Kesar Bagh Gardens. And here we can see in the miniatures, all the Nawabs had a close connection with the river, the water, and the shapes, the beautiful patterns of the boats. You can see a swan shape there. And the right side is Asifuddaula, and on the right side it's Saadat Ali Khan. That's what the miniature says in books. Now, after the 1857, the war, now that the redevelopment which happened, that you can see the plan, lot many roads were cut, and around the Machi Bhavan, the whole woodland was cleared, and 3 main roads were planned by Robert Napier, the engineer, military engineer, 50 meters wide, which ran across the city. It destroyed lot many palaces, lot many properties, and now English concepts buildings were isolated. Now smaller lawns were planned around it, and they were sort of manicured lawns to reach them, and totally English in concept, and the whole vocabulary was totally different now. Now the Hazratganj came into being, the Queensway with these tall columns, the High Street, and the feel of English, the skyline was there. The Charbagh and so many buildings came into being. This is just an example. But the Avdi architecture is still pronounced in there. It was by Samuel Jacob, the English architect, was the design of his was there. You can see the now the domes have a little bit changed, more elongated, a chessboard pattern, and all these so many domes with the, of course, the parapet is smaller and now the domes are bigger in size. That's what happened during this period. This is the elevations of that this thing, and you can see the plan. It's look at the number of domes here, not many. Now, after post colonial period, the developments which happened, like in fact in 2003, the Kuria Ghat was constructed, and it was a cremation ground, is a bathing ground, and only a very numbered kind of development happened along the river Gomti. Since now the river was totally placid and it was mute, and all the buildings opened towards the roadside, and the forest land was cleared, and it was just unhappy in itself. And in 2003, smaller developments took place. In fact, Shahid Smarak was happened, and then Kuria Ghat. Now coming to the modern era, and in fact now here I would like to stop, and I would call in Amita ji to we can talk about the contemporary architecture on the riverside development which are happening here, and if you can unmute her, please.
I think this deserves a whole other discussion period because we would really like to look at in detail at each of these buildings and how, they're changing, the architectural face of the Gomti riverfront, and they're actually not, they're not accessible from the river or to the river. So that is a very important point, and I think it deserves a whole, hour or two. Maybe we can schedule it later. But today, I think we had a very good sense of, what happened in the 18th century and the impact of Claude Martin on buildings of the 18th century and early 19th century. So I think the audience may have more insights and more points, comments, questions.
Yes. If I would see the chat box if any questions is there, or any participant would like to ask a question, it would be wonderful. Can I, Khushbu, can we have the audience participation if anybody is really interested?
Yes, we can have. So any participant who has a question can actually unmute themselves and ask. And right now I'm just going through the chat box, and I think there are a few questions being asked by the participants. And I think they have been answered with like where they were discussing that is there French influence in monuments developed after Martin's era. So these were, I think, covered during the presentation when Vipul ma'am gave according to it. And more of like, I would like anybody who has any question regarding the topic that we have to please ask.
I had a question. I'm Pratap Srivastava. It was about the Musabagh area plan. It was very fascinating. And does it have the support of the government? Has it been put to the government? Because a number of agencies would be involved if that is to be successful.
Yes, this was actually a studio project done a few years ago, and I prepared a report, and it is available on the internet. I submitted it to Lucknow Tourism. I'm not sure what came of it, but I saw it as a point of beginning a discussion on what can be done with Musabagh, given that the building either the reconstruction of the building might be difficult. So preserving the ruins in a landscape that is of that adds to the public space system is what I would hope for. How many agencies? Well, I don't you would be in a better position to answer that. Besides, state archaeology, tourism, INTAC surely has a role to play. Municipality, Awas Vikas Board, I think the villagers who live there, should be involved in any participatory planning if you want to conserve the ruins in a landscape that is not going to further damage and obliterate the ruins.
Right, very true, Amitaji, because it is basically that will is required in these matters, and if their strong will is there, everything is possible, and coordination would not be a problem. And as we see in this Chhatar Manzil complex, the things are going very slow. But still, we see the restoration and of Darshan Vilas and certain buildings. So, if the proposal is there, of course it is very much there, and they want to do. The Department of Culture would be involved, and of course the irrigation department,
Yes.
because the matter of water bodies, and tourism, of course, tourism would be there. So it's not a very big. It can be done if it's sort of desired. So it's a very good proposal, and
I would
now when the yes.
ask, what is what is the role of also takes upon itself to do restoration and reconstruction, and how can the members, especially our audience today, can be part of a call for action here?
Yes, very true. In fact, Mamita ji, to let you know what happened, like even this for the restoration of Chhatar Manzil and developing into a city museum, it was proposed by INTAC only. In 2014, I had presented the proposal in a seminar. In fact, it was a national-wide conference, and I presented this proposal in a paper of mine, which said that it would be a living museum, and these structures would be part of that cultural complex. And of course, it did not take away, it took away right away. It took not many years, like 2014. From 2014, we INTAC prepared the DPR. We prepared the detailed proposal in front of the Chief Secretary and the Chief Minister. The proposal was discussed. We presented it, and at that particular point of time, it did not happen. So, but it of course took off in 2000, I think 17 or 18. Of course, the body was changed, and you understand the government how it works. But it really got started. Whatever the pace is, whatever the budgetary constraints, but we had presented this proposal, and slowly, but it was in the central part of Lucknow. Now,
Yes.
If government gives a little bit of hint, we can always come forward, and we can go forward, and we can present this proposal, in fact, inviting you and taking from you the detailed suggestions, and we can present it to the government. But the perspective, the correct perspective is required, and the correct signals should be there. That is the basic hurdles, Amitaji, which is very much evident in India, and particularly UP and in Lucknow.
Okay.
Or specific.
Yeah. I think we
Thank
could.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I think
that's
we could go beyond the monument and look at the spaces between the monument, and that is what is necessary, because landscape conservation, or bringing back the historic landscape, is not easy. Too much has happened, since then. So I think INTAC and other interested heritage enthusiasts can start thinking about public spaces and the improvement of public spaces because they give the right kind of setting to the building. We've concentrated so far on the heritage building only, but Nawabi architecture, Mughal architecture, and I guess also the buildings were always part of a larger landscape. The connection between inside and outside was so important. And today, as more and more attention is being paid, to building up the park system in Lucknow, especially along the riverfront, I would think that contemporary designers will come back to reestablishing that relationship between the building and the site, between the building and the garden.
That's it. Very true. In fact, we can see that the memorial parks which happened in 2003 and 4, they were besides the river Gomti, but they did not have any access to it. The river was just a backdrop. Then, of course, even of course, Lohia Park was little away. Then Janeshwar Mish Park, it happened. It was far off. Even the riverfront, what we can see, Amitaji, it is not interactive. Riverfront is there. The chhatris are inspired from the architecture. Of course, the curvilinear pathways and everything looks very nice when lighted up, and beautification is good. But we are not interacting. Still, we are not interacting with the river. We can use the river Gomti to basically to have a peep inside the city's culture and history. Like River Gomti can play a very important part, a very important role to connect the old Lucknow and the new Lucknow. Like we can start from say old Lucknow and have a boat ride down the river towards the old Husainabad area. And what a beautiful skyline we can get of domes and minarets of Chiliawali Masjid or Rumi Darwaza or Clock Tower. And from, say, even from Gomti Nagar, if we go towards, we had a program, Amitaji, in the month of Feb, something to do with River Gomti, where we had taken our boats from Shahid Smarak to Kudia Ghat.
Oh,
and yeah, and people really enjoyed, and I've got queries and I've got people asking me, when are we repeating it? So the Gomti has such a beautiful sort of that, I will not say aura, but it can play a pivotal role in connecting. We can have a river heritage trail kind of thing.
Yes, yes.
The old city, the new city is being connected to the old city, and we can view the whole, the contemporary developments and the old developments beside the banks of the river while we are in the boat. And it can work wonders in sort of learning about our city's history, our developments in terms of architecture or whatever. So if you start a ride from Gomti Nagar till Kudia Ghat, what a beautiful ride it would be. So we can propose, Amitaji, this kind of proposal. In fact, when I had this program in the month of Feb, God knows how many hurdles I had to pass. We worked for at least a month in the department of, with the Department of Irrigation and the Commissioner's office. I had to sit literally for 3 to 4 hours for at least a week. It was, the Gomti River is very dirty at the moment. That's a fact. And it had dead bodies of animals at that time. I myself saw when I had gone for a recce, and I went twice or thrice. But if there's a bureaucratic will and the government desires, of course there are not many expenditures involved in it, and people say there's no water in Gomti, but we can see that after that particular program, there was one international event, and there was boat ride on the river Gomti, but it was just for a few weeks or something. So why can't we continue the year round? So that kind of proposal, if it's worked out, and I would request you to, if you can collaborate with Lucknow chapter, entire Lucknow chapter, we can present it to the government, and we hope for the positive response. Of course, it's difficult, but it's not impossible. So on this note, I can.
Yeah. I had one last question of you. I remember walking along Chatar Manzil, I think it was 2012 or 13, along with students from Lucknow School of Architecture, and we had to find our way through brush. So with the restoration of the building, is the space between the building and the river now a promenade or path?
Now, with the riverfront, with the last government, they were trying to make it, but somehow there was a change of government, and it's all sort of stopped, and still incomplete work, wastage of money, and everything happened. But now the plans are shelved, and it is just a small patch which is still functioning, and where the people can enjoy sitting beside the river bank and have a nice time. But still, it's no connection, and the banks you were saying, it is still very unkempt and not at all walkable. It is not walkable at the moment. They were doing something in that proposal, the riverfront proposal, but it did not happen, unfortunately. That's it.
Okay. Well, we have to be optimistic about the future, and with more and more attention to the potential of the river to contribute to public spaces. I think the future is good.
Yeah, that's it. Let's hope for the best. And with this note, I think the time is quite like it's up, rather we are beyond our time limit, and it was such an interesting conversation with you and interacting with you with such wonderful ideas that time really flew. And I would now thank you and the participants who are here with us for the precious time they gave us, and they listened to Amita Sinha ji. It's very untimely at her place. Of course, I can understand that.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I enjoyed. I learned a lot, actually. Details of.
Kind of, yeah. But it was wonderful having you with us, Amita ji, and thank you, participants. And a very आपको अब आप ब्रेकफास्ट करिए एटलीस्ट अमिता जी, एंड आप लोग का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया लखनऊ तरीके से, लखनऊ की स्टाइल में, और जल्दी मिलते हैं
जी,
और जल्दी आई लेट यू नो। थैंक यू।
शुक्रिया।